So hello everyone, thank you very much for watching my first video, briefly going over last Friday on what happened. Today there are a few points I like to add on, but first of all, so the points I like to go over today is to respond to the media coverage that has been going on, to answer to what a lot of media is reporting regarding this matter in the town, what's happening in the Taiwanese parliament. I would also like to explain a little bit further of how this mistrust is going on in Parliament, how the matters are being handled by KMT and TPP, the Taiwan's People Party, and the Kuomintang, the KMT. Why this would matter to you, and also how many flaws there were during these procedures, and also why this is relevant to not just the Taiwanese people, and also to elaborate a little further. Excuse me. So first of all, I'd like to respond to the media coverage. Well, Taiwan people are very grateful that after 8 years, after so many years, Taiwan is being seen not just for chips, but actually for democracy and for many more values, and for the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage, and also many more. But the most important thing to address is why you would see the Democratic lawmakers making this kind of protest. So, namely, why do the members from the Democratic Progressive Party, why over the past even decades, ever since the canceling of the martial law in Taiwan, before then to up till now, why the DPP lawmakers use this method to protest? It's very easy for us who grew up in North America or other Western countries, Western democratic countries, so to speak, to not understand why this kind of method is necessary. Well, every law that has a lot of flaws during the process of the lawmaking is detrimental to many countries, and especially Taiwan, or countries that are suffering, that are developing a very fragile democracy. And so why the Taiwanese lawmakers are protesting this is because there were flaws in the procedure of how the bills were handed, all the way from the MPs to the procedure committee to each of the committee and to the second and third reading. Now, procedural justice is very important when lawmakers decide to make laws. So from bills, and not every MP has to have any law background, but they have to know that how each process in the lawmaking process is very vital and very important. And once you decide to violate some of those and decide to bypass and decide to kind of play tricks on that and try to fool the people, that is not right. What happened on Friday was, I think I will show the chart again. So the controversy, this is the flow chart of how the law is being made, right? So as again, the KMT and the TPP, the opposition coalition, decided to only let their law pass the procedural committee and send to each committee for discussion. The controversy of this, also, I'm going to use the words controversy a lot because it's very controversial. The current version that was being sent, the main cause of the Friday fistfight in the parliament was from the step of the General Assembly. So the KMT and the TPP opposition, they basically only let their bill pass the procedural committee and to send to committee. For the DPP's version of how they want to have reform in the parliamentary process, the KMT and the TPP try to silence them. For some amendments, they didn't let them pass through procedural committee. And even some of them passed through this and got sent to each of the committee, especially the committee that is very vital for to talk, the judicial committee, where they talk about the reform of the parliament. What the KMT and the TPP did is, whenever the DPP lawmakers tried to discuss their version in the committee, in the judicial committee, members from the opposition brought out a motion to adjourn. So basically to silence them from being discussed. So if you don't discuss them, and every time when they want to move the path to the General Assembly, it gets rejected. Because if you know, so the lawmaker that fell from the podium, Dr. Puma Shen, he's a professional lawmaker, and he has a lot of law background. He knows how all the processes are going. But what happens is every time he tries to speak to talk about this, discuss the TPP version of the bill in the Judicial Committee, what happened is the opposition lawmakers bring up motion to adjourn. And so the TPP really wants to also bring some reform into the parliament with good intentions. And when they want to discuss their version, they didn't get a chance. So from there is a procedural injustice where opposition only talk about what they want and they just smoothly went over this process and go to General Assembly. And the DPP's version were with good intentions, they're being blocked. They're being silenced. They're not even being discussed because they cannot. Because when they want, the opposition brings a motion to adjourn. And that is very, very detrimental to democracy and also to procedural justice. That is very important. And so on Friday, during the General Assembly, now what the opposition is trying to do is to lay a bill to the General Assembly and bring up many amendments. So what they want to do on Friday is they bring up many amendments with a package of amendments, so to speak, to the General Assembly. And this, if you, for some of you who watch live videos of the opposition lawmakers, Huang Guochang, if you actually went and watched this video, he even stated that what we want to amend to this package of the reform of legislature is top secret. And actually, on the website of the Legislative Yuan, all these amendments were not published prior to sending this bill for a vote in the General Assembly. So there is many procedural injustice. First of all, as I said during the process, the version of the DPP's reform of the legislature was not discussed at all because the opposition brings a motion to adjourn. And so the good version was not discussed at all. That is kind of like an abuse of procedural justice. And on General Assembly on Friday, the KMT and the TPP, so the opposition bloc, they decided to send in a lot of amendments that people don't even know what they're amending to this bill, right? And the thing about that, why there's a fist fight and why you see a lawmaker, one of the DPP lawmaker, try to grab all the documents from the Secretary of the Legislative Yuan is because this non-transparency, nothing is transparent. And if the opposition bloc were to just swiftly go over this process, then today we'll have law that we don't even know what amendments there are. And if you think about on a daily process, when you present to your colleagues, let's say to your colleagues, the ideas of your project, then you want on to present to the general public with a total different version, of a version that your colleagues did not previously agree. That is also a really big flaw in the procedure. And this is a really big worry because of the abuse of the procedural justice. I have to re-emphasize the controversy is the abuse of procedural justice. You don't let any DPP's proposals to be discussed in the committees or even block them in a procedural committee. And on the day of the General Assembly, you want to swiftly pass through these bills, these amendments that are not even transparent, not known to the public, not even on the website of the Legislative Yuan. And that creates a lot of mistrust in the government. And I think for the next videos, we can talk about the controversies in these reforms because there are many details to be discussed. TPP has their own version that has never been discussed in the parliament because every time, as I said, the TPP lawmaker, Dr. Puma Shen, when he tries to talk about that, he gets silenced and motion to adjourn is being brought up. So no constructive discussion can go on. And the opposition bloc wants to swiftly pass through in the General Assembly laws that people don't even know what they're passing through. So I think that's for the next video. So a lot of mistrust in the procedure and how they use every trick to build mistrust between people. And they kind of prey on this lack of understanding of the legislative process. Now, I have to say that a lot of people who want to criticize how the lawmakers are protesting in the parliament, they don't even know the whole legislative process that for one law from bill goes to law. And I think it's also very important to questions from some of my friends. They said that, well, in a lot of countries, there is contempt of legislature. So why the version in Taiwan is different. So there are many details that can be discussed. What in many countries they can interrogate, of course, different individuals, but they can never use this law against any people from the executive branch. In the opposition bloc, one of their amendments is to make this into crime. They want to interrogate the they want to interrogate people, so officials from the executive branch, and you have legislative, you have executive. The executive branch, the legislative branch, they want to use judicial power to charge people, officials that are in the executive branch. That itself is a violation of the Constitution, but also, again, that's topic for later. So you don't compare apples to oranges. First of all, you don't compare how people who live in fragile democracy are protesting versus people who, like us, who grew up in Western democracy. It's very different. It's unfair to compare apples to oranges, and you have many more significant consequences when you compare. For example, comparing Taiwan to Canada. I grew up in Canada. It's very unfair to compare how lawmakers from two countries are dealing with law because of the difference in democracy. And another question that's raised by my friend is, in many countries, there can be presidential vetoes. So in the United States, and also for example, in the news we see in Georgia, the president just vetoed the foreign agent law. So the legislative process in Taiwan and the presidential power can be illustrated in this figure. So the presidential power in Taiwan is, first of all, law that is passed in the parliament, in the legislative yuan, with a simple majority. So it doesn't have to be an absolute majority. When it's passed in the parliament, it gets sent to the president for signature. There are two routes that the president can take. One is to simply sign it into law. And there's other path that can be taken is that when the president thinks it has to be reconsidered, then the president can send it again to the parliament. And in that case, a parliament needs to have an absolute majority in order for the law to be passed. So from the first, it can be a simple majority, but for reconsideration, it has to be an absolute majority. And bring back to how the Taiwan People's Party, they want to be the minority that is the kingmaker, so to speak, the minority that holds a very, influential power. If we look at this chart again of the seat distribution of the parliament again, so the ruling party TPP gets 51 seats. The opposition bloc in total, the KMT, start with the KMT, they got 54 seats. And the Taiwan People's Party, they got 8 seats. So in this case, as I just said, if the TPP really wants to be the very, very crucial kingmaker minority, they can, during this process, they can even right now, they don't even have to agree with the KMT. They can vote against it. This amendment of this law that is very controversial and that bypasses a lot of procedural justice and that violates a lot of trust and also the procedural justice. They can vote against it. Okay, so the simple majority, if they choose to abstain in the first time what the bill is being sent to the president, whatever. If the president then sends back to the parliament for reconsideration, now here's where it's becoming crucial. If they really think about the people and think about the consequences of how it can get, then they can be the kingmaker and say no. Or they can just also vote abstain when the president sends it for reconsideration. But we'll see what they do. They basically unite as the opposition bloc to let their bills, the version of the bill, move swiftly and all the way to the General Assembly. And they even cooperate with KMT, the TPP. They cooperate with the KMT, basically to silence TPP. They also have a vote in the committee. So when a motion to adjourn is being brought up in the committee, they can say no to allow fruitful discussion when it comes to these amendments of the reform of the legislature. But they chose not to. They sided with them. And even the procedural committee, they also chose to block many of the DPP's proposals. So it's very disappointing. And the next thing I want to talk about is how this is relevant to you. So if you learn about what's going on, or if you're paying attention to what's happening in the Russian invasion in Ukraine, then you will see how in Euromaidan in 2014. Even before 2014, how the Ukrainian parliament, the lawmaking process, and how the president, many things, this is also another video, but how this went from, a lawmaking process to an even bigger scale. And I like to kind of draw the parallel to what's happening in Georgia right now. So the country in Europe, Georgia. So the parliament wants to pass the foreign agent law, which they did pass, but the president just decided to veto it because it is very detrimental to the country. And you see many people protesting on the streets in Georgia. And I always like to bring your attention to, you can quote me on this, but what China is doing to Taiwan right now is what Russia is currently doing to Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. So for people who know what's happening, then you know what's actually happening. It's at a very crucial point, because one misstep, then there can be significant irreversible consequence. And for those who are asking, so why do the people gather outside on Friday night? It's because a lot of people of them, they don't want this to pass. And this brings back memories to the sunflower movement in 2014. This is also being brought up because what happened then, what sparked, what was the activation energy? Sorry, I'm a scientist. Was the activation energy of the protest of the sunflower movement? It's also due to the procedural justice, how the KMT violated the procedural justice. That is also for another video. But if you draw a parallel to 2014, 2024, back then, KMT has a presidency, the vice presidency, and the majority in the parliament. So they can pass whatever they want to pass. But they also decided to violate the procedural justice. Whereas right now, 2024, TPP has the presidency and the vice presidency, but they do not have the majority of in the parliament. And I'm going to bring, I have to show this chart over and over again, how the seat distribution. Now the KMT, what sparked the biggest controversy and what was the activation energy of the sunflower movement in 2014, they don't have the majority. They have 54 seats. And in order for have an absolute majority, you need 57. So then TPP, before the election, they claim to be this kingmaker. They want to do the best for people. And when you have this such controversial law that basically ignores the procedural justice, and you have DPP cooperating with KMT of wanting to push this through without making this transparent. And Huang Guoqiang is a lawmaker that always so passionate about transparency in the legislature. But what he's doing right now is doing the complete opposite. And funny thing is, he was a figurative leader 10 years ago in the sunflower movement, where he actually came out and criticized what the KMT is doing. But right now the KMT is doing the same thing. He is siding with the KMT. So I would also like to bring your attention to TPP, because they have a lot of support from the young people. So my generation, I don't support them at all, and a lot of people from my generation don't support TPP. But from the polls, they benefit from the highest support from the young people. They have the chance to stop this by simply voting. They don't even have to protest, but they decided to side with the evil KMT, who we've seen from 10 years ago did the same thing. So really begs the question of why this is happening. So today I kind of briefly went over why the Democratic lawmakers have to protest this way. I like to urge all the media to really think about, really consider the differences and the privileges of us growing up in Western democratic countries. We benefit from a lot of good system that's being established because we have well-established democracy. But for people in Taiwan, they sometimes need really more violent ways to protest, because if one by one a controversial law is passed, it's kind of like a domino effect, and it wouldn't be good for the Taiwanese society. And so I really beg all the international media to really focus and to really investigate into why this is being done, and yeah, to understand why people protest what that they do is because this is the last chance to save democracy, and we need to appreciate how much they're trying to do to save this. And also, I would like everyone to know that procedural justice is a really big thing. If you violate that and you decide to pass your bill without transparency, then this can create a lot of problems. And God bless Taiwan. And I'd also like to send my best wishes to Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And thank you for watching this video. I'm going to make more talking about other matters, but thank you. Bye.